So I got a question for you. Who enjoys surprises? Who hates to be surprised? You want predictable life. Have you ever experienced a surprising twist in your life that just blew your mind and God just reshaped your way you look at things? For some of us, that was that moment they stepped up to an altar or they sat in their seat and they prayed a prayer and somehow God moved in their life. I talked last week how I about ran over people getting to the altar when it was that time. I feel sorry for that poor little old lady. I can't even remember her name, but I just about plowed her over. I'm sure that wasn't what God wanted. But during this time, this Palm Sunday that we're going to talk about a little bit, I want you to reflect on times when you were genuinely surprised by God's actions in your life. And if you haven't been surprised by God, you have not been paying attention. Because He will do things that you're like, okay, sometimes, right? We're going to focus a little bit on this scripture right here today. Luke 19:28 says this: Jesus' journey to Jerusalem symbolizing His approach to the city of God and His role as the peaceful sacrificial lamb. I'm going to read it exactly as it's put. After telling this story, He went on towards Jerusalem, walking ahead of His disciples, is what He did. So we're talking about Passover. I talked with the kids about when He walked in, it was not just your normal everyday parade welcome to town. The celebration He received was paramount to what Roman conquering Caesars did when they came back from campaigns. They made a big deal of Jesus coming to town. The palm fronds, and they literally laid their cloaks on the ground so that the actual donkey would never touch the ground. They thought that much of Him. But there's got to be something about this. This all occurred during Passover. Now, Passover is a huge thing in the Jewish faith. It's a holiday that commemorates the liberation of slavery from Egypt. It's when the lamb, the angel of death, was going through the land of Egypt, and he said, "Look, put some blood on the doorposts, and He'll pass over your house and go to the next house." This was the catalyst that led to them getting out of Egypt, to forming the Israel that they lived in at that point in time. But what is Passover? I'll tell you that it begins in the month of Nisan, which is usually March or April from what we know. It usually runs between the 15th and the 21st of Nisan. And you thought the Japanese had that all right. No, it's Hebrew. Just one S though. On these 7 days, Jody talked about it, the first 3 days all the leaven is removed from the house. Because in the Old Testament, leaven refers to sin. So they're making sure that all of the impurities are out of that house. And it's really cool because I used to hang out with a Jewish couple, and it was kind of neat because they still do it. He would go in, and the husband goes in like with a white glove test and says, "Well, there's leaven there." And the wife's duty is to get it out of the house. Which is kind of sexist, I know, but that's the way it is. So they're getting all this out. See, the matzo that they're trying to get out of the house, the leaven, symbolizes the Hebrews, the suffering and bondage they had when they were in Egypt. The fact that they had lost their way. Why did they spend 40 years in the wilderness? Yes, they disobeyed, but they had forgotten who their God was. How many in our world are walking in a wilderness because we've forgotten who God is? How many of us are going through unnecessary trials because we, somewhere in our walk, forgot how glorious God is? This is a reminder. When He enters here, it's a symbolization of that liberation. It's a symbolization of the sacrifice that is going to come. Because he has come to terms at this point that, look, this is going to happen and I can't do anything about it. He could have stayed out in the countryside. It would have probably never happened. But he was going to go and he was going to raise the kind of havoc that they were going to have to do something about it. Because people in power will not allow you to buck the system. They were not going to allow him to buck the system, and he was about to buck it big time. But this fulfillment of this prophecy actually declares, when they're doing all this, they are recognizing Jesus as King. But we also know he's being recognized as the sacrificial lamb. Look at what's going to go on in the next few days. He's going to go to the temple. He's going to upset the tables. He's going to tell them that, look, if you kill me in 3 days, I'm just going to rebuild the temple. You can tear the temple down. I'm going to rebuild it. He's going to tell them, in effect, I am God. The Jewish rabbis, their Sadducees and Pharisees, they were not going to accept this. And almost all of them, with the exception of a couple, were going to have him killed. But we also know he's going to go to sleep on Friday. But we're going to celebrate Sunday because, my friends, I know where Muhammad is. I know where Gandhi's buried. I know where Buddha's supposedly buried. We know where Confucius is buried. Jesus' tomb is empty. Newsflash, I've been there. The tomb is empty. And we're going to celebrate that next week. You don't know how good that's going to be. But let's look at this a minute. He procured a colt. In Mark 11:3, he sent the two disciples to get the colt. And he says, if anybody asks you why you are doing this, say the Lord has need of it, and he'll send it back to you shortly. He'll send it back to you in a bit. Why a donkey? Why a donkey? Most kings rode in on a horse. Romans rode in on chariots and a whole bunch of horses. Jesus chose a donkey. But some of the responses will help you out. If you read 2 Kings 9:13, it says here, they will quickly took their cloaks and spread them under him on the bare steps. And they blew the trumpets and sounded, Jehu is king. Prophecy much? How about this? The opposition. Let's talk about the opposition. The Pharisees could not stand Jesus. Because Jesus, number one, was upsetting the system. He was messing with the system. Oh, and claimed to be God. They had a problem with that. And some of them just didn't like the fact that he worked on Sabbath. They had a big problem with him working on the Sabbath. And they decided they were going to kill him. And it says here in verses 39 and 40 in Luke 19. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to them, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. I tell you, replied, if I told them to be quiet, the stones would cry out. The stones would cry. His response was simply, look, if I tell them to shut up, don't worry, the stones are going to yell. Because they know who I am too. If they shut up one part of the church, the other part of the church is going to yell. This proves that what's going to happen is inevitable. Now, what bakes my noodle is the devil's going to think he won on Friday, not realizing he'd already lost. How did you not know? You're supposedly wise. You lost. Always bakes my noodle. I always try to understand the other side of the fence too. But let's look at some surprising aspects. He is ushering in his role as priest. He's ushering in his role as king. He's also rushing in his role as prophet because he's about to tell about the future. He's been telling about the future for quite a while. And he's entered Jerusalem a few times, but this one's big because he's embodying these roles all at the same time, simultaneously. He's doing this all at once. I'm going to read verses 14 through 16 in Hebrews. It says this, "Therefore, since we have great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith that we profess." 15, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weakness." Thank God. "But we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet did not sin. So let us approach God's throne with grace and confidence so that we may receive the mercy and find the grace and help in our time of need." His plan was not basic. He's rolling in as king. He's rolling in as priest. He's rolling in as a sacrifice. And he's rolling in as prophet. Because he's already telling people what's going on. But what's really weird about this, everywhere else he went with miracles. With everyone else, he preached with this great authority. He didn't walk in with any great authority here. Or great miracles. He didn't do a whole lot of miracles. The procurator of the cult is talking about his authority, not necessarily his miraculous nature. He was focused on the answers, on the actual thought that you've seen my works already. And you haven't believed. Some of you have, but not a lot of you have believed. Some of y'all came to see the show. Well, the show's over. Are you going to believe in me for who I am? My friends, I told a great story of what I believe is a miracle, because the doctors can't answer the question either. And when the doctors can't answer the question, that tells you something. He's supposed to die. I call that a miracle, a modern day miracle. But when the miracle don't come, what do we do? When we pray for that child over and over and over, and they're still going over the cliff, what do we do? We're going to find it next week. They're going to become very disenchanted with Jesus because he didn't do what they expected him to do. He didn't take over. He didn't perform the miracles. He preached the word. And they're like, well, we had enough preaching. We don't want to hear the preacher. We want to see the show. We want you to take over and make us kings. And he says, that's not my job. Because Jesus answered here in verse 25. He says, Jesus says, did I tell you, but you do not believe the work. Believe the works in my Father's name. Testify about me. What I've done already. Look, I raised a dude from the dead. He was in a tomb for 4 days. And you don't believe yet? They had little faith. And Hebrews 11 tells us what faith is. Faith is confidence in hope, what we hope for, and assurance about what we can't see. They had no faith. They were Missouri. They were the show me state. They're like, you've got to show me again. And then if he shows over here, then someone over here is going to say, well, you got to show me. And then somebody over here is going to say, you got to show me. And guess what's going to happen? Still not going to believe. Because you're here for the show. Jesus, I believe, is a miracle working God. But he wants to get to the heart of the matter in us. And he's talking with them here. He's talking, I need to get to the heart of the matter. You don't believe no matter what I do. And the crowd's reaction, it's going to fluctuate here. It goes from reverence at the beginning to rejection on Thursday. From love to virtual hatred in 4 days. And it's if you think about it, it's kind of strange because they admired him. But it's going to all change. Listen to Matthew 27, 20 through 22 real quick. But the chief priests and the elders persuaded a crowd to ask Barabbas and have Jesus executed. Which is the two you don't want to be released, he asked. And they said, Barabbas, they answered. What shall I do with Jesus who is called the Messiah? Pilate asked. They screamed, crucify him. This is the unpredictable nature of humans. And I think it's even in our walks today. Lord, what have you done for me lately? So many people have left the church because they believed God was going to do something a certain way, but they were basing their entire faith journey on whether or not He did that. And when it didn't happen, they got disillusioned and walked off. Jesus didn't leave you, my friend. Jesus left them, or you left Jesus. Jesus has been standing there the whole time, so Jesus has nothing to do with it. He's waiting for you. And with these people here, He's waiting. He says, look, love me. Love me for who I am. Not for what I do. Love me for the relationship, not for the miracles. But so often we're enthralled with the miracle Jesus. And yes, it's really, really, really cool. But more often than not, it's just faith. You got to believe, even when the miracle doesn't happen, my friends. So how do we apply this to our universe? Because, Kevin, this is some real cool stuff. It's really a little bit deeper than I was expecting on Palm Sunday, which is celebration. How does this work in my world? Anybody ever wonder, hey, Kevin, how's that work? I had a young girl named Vivian in the middle school class. Vivian had a rough life. Her mom had left when she was like 10. Her dad was a truck driver. She's been raised by her older brothers. To say she was a tomboy was an understatement, but she was a beautiful, blonde-haired, blue-eyed little girl. And right before I left to go to Kentucky, she sits down with me because she was upset because I was leaving because I was kind of the guy that she could come to and talk to. And so one person had to leave behind. It broke my heart. I said, how do you know there's a God, Kevin? Yeah, not Mr. Carter, Kevin. So I used this analogy. I said, over here, I got all these letters, I got all this paper, I got all this cardboard, I got all these numbers. They drop down on a table and write Moby Dick without a man touching them. Is that possible? She's like, no way. That's not the word she used, but no way. Remember, she was raised by her brothers. Sweet girl, though. I said, okay, so you want me to accept then that your blonde hair, your blue eyes, your beautiful attitude that's not so beautiful sometimes, the personality you have, the body type you have, just dropped down and made a Vivian on accident? He said, that don't really make sense. I said, then that proves there's a creator of some sort. Now, we can argue over whether He's good. We can argue over whether He's not so good. We can have those discussions, even though I know what I believe. But you can't deny a creator. And so I told her, I said, look, you're in 7th grade. You're supposed to have questions. When he's in 7th grade, you'll get questions, sir. Everything you say will be questioned, sir. Bless you. You'll have questions because that's what 7th and 8th graders do. Never, never, never eliminate the possibilities. And I left it at that. And then I heard about her for about 2 years, and then she just dropped off the planet. I pray for her all the time. But stay open to how God, this is how it's going to work in your life. You got to stay open to what God may do in your life. I still contend that you're not pushing up flowers because God still has a plan for you. And I have read that Bible through and through. I've read it twice in the last year. I'm guaranteeing you there's no experiment on ministry age. There's no retirement date. Retirement's when they put you in the ground and we say some prayers and have some tears and celebrate the life that you lived. How might our expectations and perceptions blind how God is really working in our lives? Do we base our life on what God can, our faith on what God can do for us? So when the check doesn't come and the bill and the bill doesn't get paid, or the healer doesn't show up quite in the way you expected, you get disillusioned? Or do we love Jesus for who He is? If He never did another thing on earth, this was enough. This is enough. And I have faith that He can do far more, because He said in Scripture, I can do far more abundantly. He told the disciples, you will do more than I did. And the disciples said, you guys there's more of you. You should be able to do more than we did. But we don't. Remember, they took over a world, the known world of the time, with 12 people, basically. Or 11 people. But what's the danger of having expectations? We get disillusioned. Well, He didn't answer this prayer. Well, sometimes He answers no, my friends. Sometimes it's wait. I've asked for many thing in my walk, Lord, take this from me. And He said, no. You need to trust me to help you deal with this. But I could have got mad, taken my little church box and gone home. But I didn't do that. Did I pout a little bit? Oh, probably. But did I stay the course? I'm still on course, folks. Sometimes I wind up pretty close to that ditch, but I'm still in the course. And what happens when you get in the ditch, guys? It's where your brothers and sisters drag you back on the road and get you on the right way. We talked about that yesterday. That's pretty cool. Another thing we got to do, we got to live with humility. This is the thing for us guys, I'm sorry. Because we were raised to be confident men. We were raised to believe in ourselves, and sometimes that travels over to the point of arrogancy at times. I'm the same way. You got to learn to be humble. And I guarantee you, if you're walking in God and you get a little cocky, He'll humble you. I guarantee it. He'll put you in a situation, yeah, you're God, you got me. Because I want you to remind you that God's faithful love and new mercies come every morning. It's because today was horrible. Hey, that's what I got for making bacon on this stove back here yesterday. It was a nice little second-degree burn on my hand. It wasn't a great morning. Well, I flipped it and it just splashed up. It happens. So, but did it stop us from having a good men's ministry? And when I was teaching, he couldn't tell I was in excruciating pain, because I said, I'm going to work through this because I got a job to do. And God will get me through it. And guess what God did? He got me through it. Was I in pain? Yes. Until about 10 o'clock last night. It was talking to me and it wasn't saying nice things. So I got a question for you. Are you willing to be surprised by God? Are you willing? How about this week? Maybe you asked that person to church that said no 100 times, and they say, yes, I'd love to come. Hey, bribe them. Take them to dinner. Hey, do what you got to do. You get them before God and let Him do. You catch them, He'll clean them and fry them for you. Okay. But we got to get the message to them somehow, some way. I want you to look for unexpected blessings this week. When something unexpected happens, I say, it's just luck. No. That might be God right in the middle of your situation. I can't count the times in the last year God's just been in the middle of my situations. Just right in the middle. Just like, wow. And you can't deny it because you weren't expecting that in the mail. You can't deny it because you weren't expecting the conversation you really needed, or the pat on the back, or the encouragement that you really needed at that moment, and all of a sudden it just comes. And I can believe God's in the middle of that. Because one person said, look, I don't do this often, but I'm going to do it. This isn't me, but I'm going to do it. And it really blessed me. So I want you to understand that Palm Sunday is really a big deal. We wave palm fronds and have a lot of fun, but it's really a big deal. Because Jesus is basically saying, look, I'm king, but I'm about to sacrifice myself for you. Because in a week, they're people just like me and you. They're going to hate him. And he's going to get on a cross that looks like this, but much bigger. And he says, Lord, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Sometimes we don't know what we're doing, my friends. I want you to reflect on how God is active in our everyday believers. How He'll do things every once in a while when your faith is at a low point. You'll get a call from Pam who will say, my brother had a stroke and walked out of the hospital today. They said he was dead, but he just went home. What do you do with that when you don't believe in miracles? What do you give it? Do you call it dumb luck? I don't believe in dumb luck. I believe in intentional design. What are we going to do with it? Are you going to look? Are you going to look for Jesus, God's miracles, God to work in your world this week? I encourage you, be cognizant of what's going on. This is Holy Week. I already told you, I believe God's about to do something cool. I don't know what cool is, but I got some ideas of what cool is in my brain. What He thinks is cool might be totally different from what I'm planning. That's okay. It's His house. It's not mine. It's not yours. It's His. And then I'm not going to get in His way. Jesus is the surprising king here because He's not the picture of a king that we see when we go. He's the surprising king in our lives. We can't see Him. We can't touch Him. We know He's there. And if you've ever been with Him and you're the same, I want to know who you were with that it wasn't Jesus. I contend that. And if you say, I've experienced Jesus and you didn't change, Scripture tells you time and time that people were changed. Remember, that woman at the well was never quite the same. She told the whole city about Jesus. You know how you know? Because Paul goes back about 5-6 years later, and there are a bunch of Christians there. She might have been the first evangelist. Just a conversation at a well. Ladies, what well are you sitting at? That God just needs to give you a touch. Men, what's eating at us that we just can't defeat? That God just needs to give us a touch.